not happy with Jay Powell. I don't think he's doing a good job at all. I don't think he's much of a chess player. Do I want him to resign? Let me put it this way. If he did, I wouldn't stop him.
President Trump again saying he is not a fan of Fed Chair Jerome Powell for not lowering interest rates enough. And markets on Friday apparently not a fan of the president upping the trade war with China. So what happens to Powell now? Joining me now is Steve Forbes. He is back. David Grasso and Deirdre Bolton is back as well. So, Steve, what happens to Powell? The president clearly wants him to resign. He could maybe also fire him, no?
Legally, probably not, but if the White House wants him out, they can force him out. Harry Truman did it twice when he was president with Fed chairman. They had huge wars in the late 40s, early 50s, had to come to a formal accord in 1951. So if he wants to push it, he can ultimately win.
By the way, just a fine point, Truman didn't actually fire them, but how did he force them out?
Just by making their lives intolerable.
Which sounds familiar.
So there's precedent here.
Yeah.
And in those battles with the Fed, the presidents always win, going back to Woodrow Wilson, World War I. So the question is if he wants to push it. What I think he would like is a rate cut, and I think at the end of the next few weeks there will be a rate cut. And but he would like 100 basis points. Powell will give him only 25.
Well, Deidre, guess what? It's not just the president who wants the markets want a rate cut too. They want a big. Yeah. They would be very happy with a full 1% rate drop.
Yeah,
right?
I feel that Friday was all about President Trump grabbing the mic from Fed Chairman Jay Powell, because Jay Powell was out, right, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. That was supposed to be the day that we all talked about Fed policy and what they were doing. And I think President Trump just thought, you know what? This isn't going fast enough. It's not effective enough. So now when you see the markets, the Dow in particular, down more than 600 points and down for the week, now I am sure Jay Powell does actually have to consider at least the possibility of making more cuts than he had previously thought.
And David, it was a crazy day yesterday. Deirdre and I were talking about
it's
this
hard
earlier.
to keep up.
We were on the air, but there's so much for investors this weekend to digest. Usually you can take a summer weekend off and just kind of go to the beach or whatever. Not this weekend. Investors have to worry.
There is no time off in this world, evidently. And you know what's interesting is every president has tried to influence the Fed chair. You know, Reagan famously asked Volcker to not raise interest rates before the 1984 election. So this is not out of the ordinary. The difference is, of course, is that he's doing it much more publicly, and this is the first time a president is communicating by Twitter. So this is untraditional in that sense, but really a president trying to influence a Fed chairman is as old as time.
Steve, let me talk about what Deidre calls the drop the mic moment or grab the mic moment. The president did indeed grab it from Powell. But let's go through this sequence of events. And by the way, investors love conspiracy theories. So I'm going to preface this. This is a conspiracy theory. So early on Friday, you had Powell coming out saying the only thing that would really get us to lower rates would be more trade problems with China. Then you had these tweets from the president that obviously would create more trade problems with China. Do you think the president was trying to force Powell's hand or force the hand of the Fed to lower rates by creating more China problems?
No, I think he's got that siloed. He's got China and then he's got the Fed. And so he was going to shoot at Powell no matter what. Powell's not going to be allowed to keep that microphone even if he's in Jackson Hole. President's now over in Europe.
But to the president's credit, I mean, clearly Powell made a huge mistake in December, did he not?
They should elevate the debate. Why is the Fed trying to influence the economy in the first place?
That's a good point.
And why are they manipulating interest rates in the first place? Let the market set it, the price of money, instead of a bunch of mandarins in Washington who usually get it wrong. It's just a matter of how much harm the Fed does.
That sounds incredibly modern and rational. Like, why do we have meetings to determine interest rates? Mr. Forbes is right. Like, we live in a modern world. We trade on computers. Why do we have to get a bunch of humans in a room to determine what the best interest rate is?
Well,
that sounds like 1950.
Deidre, that's why this president, one of the reasons this president was elected, to disrupt things, to disrupt the status quo, which wasn't working out too well.
Yeah, and I think if you go back, I think to 1960, there have been 2 soft landings successfully engineered. So it's true that the stats are not with the Fed. it's a tough job. I mean, it's a difficult thing to get right. Free markets, if we're going to go free markets.
It's a tough job when you try to do an impossible job. I mean,
Yeah.
the fall of the Soviet Union showed the falls of central planning. And why we worship the Federal Reserve, that they shouldn't be criticized or anything, is preposterous.
Steve, here's a radical proposal. How about getting rid of it? Could we live without a Federal Reserve?
If you have a proper gold standard, yes. Another subject for another time.
I think we're a little beyond the gold standard now, Mr. Forbes. I
No,
think
sir.
we have to, we have to modernize our economy. A modern economy requires a non-gold standard. It requires fiat currency.
But Deidre,
Fiat currency, and so we have $5 trillion of trading a day.
All right, we can talk about gold for a while, but the fact is that the world is a crazy place. You have negative interest rates in Europe.
Yeah.
The president says, look, when they have negative interest rates, our currency is too high, therefore rates should come down.
Yeah, what was one of his tweets as well? On Friday, we have a strong dollar and a weak Fed. But you're right. In Germany right now, you are actually paying for the privilege of lending your money.
And it's not
to the
helping them
government.
because they're going into a recession.
Yeah, exactly.
And which gets to why aren't we floating 100-year bonds at 1% so we don't have a
But that's
fair rate increase
Argentina.
in
I don't know if that's a good idea.
We're going to have to leave a bond discussion for another day.